It happens all the time, every day, everywhere, and you don't even realize it. We're constantly engaging in persuasion. I even engage in it on a weekly basis saying, I need you to get your homework in so I give you a grade. I'm trying to persuade you to do something. So persuasion is all around us. And you're going into your persuasive speech. So there's some topics we really need to cover as you begin looking at your persuasive speech. First, the importance of persuasion. Then we need to talk about the ethics of persuasion. Look at the psychology, the types, and we'll finish up with Monroe's motivational sequence, which is something you'll be utilizing in your speech. And once after you use it and once after you learn about it, you'll understand you encounter it almost daily. Importance of persuasion. Wherever there is persuasion, there is rhetoric. And wherever there is rhetoric, there is meaning. Part of persuasion is we're giving part of ourselves and exploring. We're saying to others, this is how I feel. Do you feel the same way? So we're looking for acknowledgement in persuasion, and we're also looking to change people's minds so agree with us on things that we might find important, whether that be our political views or what the best restaurant is to go to when you're hungry at 2 a.m. in the morning. So persuasion is all around us all the time. There are different techniques we utilize for persuasion. We've talked about ethos, pathos, and logos in public speaking. Now, let's go a little bit more in depth. When we're talking about an appeal to reason, we're definitely talking about logos. We're talking about we're using logic, we're using rhetoric, we're using scientific evidence, scientific method. This is where you're seeing the statistics come out at you, and you're seeing someone say, well, 5 out of 6 people agree with me. That's a persuasive argument. But that's, again, appealing to the logic of it. That is powerful, but even more powerful, you run into the pathos, the passion of an argument, and you start talking about emotion. And this is where we make most of our decisions. Sure, we might go out and buy that nice jacket, and we really bought it because it made us feel good. We really bought it because we felt it made us better looking, more handsome, and it just really gave us an emotional boost. But when we get home, we can't say, oh, I bought this jacket because it makes me look good. No, instead, that's when we fall back to logic. We say, oh, well, I bought this jacket because it's practical and it was 25% off and that's a good deal. So emotion is where you find so many advertising going to, and persuasion is centered around. We also have aids, things that will help us with persuasion. Body language. You don't want to buy something from a grumpy old person that has their arms folded and just giving you a mean look. Instead, you want someone that's smiling. You want someone that is dressed well and is speaking well. And so body language becomes an important part of persuasion. You're not going to be persuaded if someone comes up like a 15-year-old teenager that's just really in their depressed state and says, yeah, we really should go see this movie because I really want to see it. That's not persuasive. Meanwhile, you contrast that to the 6-year-old, I really want to see this movie. It's the best movie ever. I got to see it. So suddenly, that body language difference, that child's going to be more persuasive than the teenager. And in adulthood, hey, when you go to buy something, you don't buy a used car or major electronics from someone that just looks like they just rolled out of bed and don't care about it. No, you're looking for people that have a sales technique, that look professional, that really is selling the object. Next, we have other unethical techniques. Coercive techniques are also involved in this. Deception. You've heard of these all the time. Where, okay, tell you what, you buy this and I'll give you a $500 ticket to the Bahamas. And then afterwards you find out that $500 ticket's worth about $1.50 because you can only fly at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, and you have to come home on a Thursday in the PM. And so really there was no value in it, but they deceived you. They kind of said, oh, hey, this is a great deal, but it's not truly. Hypnosis, of course, that would not be ethical. Using power, can be perhaps where even ethos comes in. We'll talk about this on the next slide. And you may have heard of subliminal advertising. And we really hear about this related to movie theaters, especially back in the 50s and 60s, where they said that what they would do during the feature movie, they'd cut in a slide or two of the concession stand, of a candy bar, of something that maybe the desert to make you thirsty. And they would go by so fast, your mental mind could not register that you actually saw this. But suddenly, halfway through a movie, you'd be like, man, my mouth is dry like the Sahara, like a desert. I really need to get something to drink. And that's what they were saying subliminal advertising was. It's still questionable whether or not it's effective, but think about the smell of popcorn. When you smell popcorn, suddenly you want to buy some. So there can be perhaps some connection there, the amount of which is questionable. The last techniques we want to talk about is brainwashing, mind control, and torture. None of these should ever be utilized ethically within persuasion. If you're waterboarding someone to buy a car, you're selling bad cars. So rather than go to those techniques, find a better something to sell. Now, this is the Milgram experiment that you see on the slide in front of you. And this really went into the ethics of persuasion. See, the gentleman in the lab coat, he's giving a power statement because the lab coat makes you think he's a medical professional. And as a medical professional, you need to do what he says. And on top of it, they threw in that this was an important and very important study they were conducting, and they wanted you to take part in it. And what they actually did was this person that looked like an authoritarian figure, they used the ethos of that. They used the passion of this is an important experiment, so it's changing lives, and how could you not participate? So then they threw in some passion, and then they threw in a little bit of logos to make a well-rounded persuasive argument. And what they expected the participants to do is to shock a person in the other room, and they even had the dial where it's supposed to be a lethal dosage. And through this form of persuasion, they actually got standard citizens to deliver potentially lethal dosages to another person. Of course, this was all an experiment about power and about persuasion. The person in the room was not receiving electrical shocks. They were just a cohort of the experimental team. But it came out that that was very an ethical way to approach persuasion. Next, the challenges we encounter with persuasion. People come into pretty much every situation having somewhat of an idea how they feel about it. They can be neutral towards it. Say a football fan, if you go up and you start talking to them about the best quarterback ever, they may be totally indifferent. They don't really care. Meanwhile, if you go talk to a fan of the New England Patriots, they're going to have a definite opinion about who the best one is. And if you're not saying that, they're going to be strongly opposed. So what you need to do going into your persuasion is understand where your audience is leaning, so that way you're not trying to strongly move them one direction or another. I mean, if they're making their money off of selling balloons, you don't want to go in there and say, well, we're the anti-balloon league and we believe all balloons should be gotten rid of. Well, you're just threatening their income and their futures, and so they're going to be strongly opposed to you, and to get them to even slightly agree with you is going to take a lot of ethos, pathos, and logos. In fact, what you might be better off to do is to start in a more neutral area, and the risk that balloons threaten to birds that may eat them and choke on them or something of that variety. So you're instead going with something where they're not strongly opposed to it. Bird health, everyone's okay with that. But getting rid of balloons, the balloon industry is against that. So you need to listen, and you need to understand where your audience is, so that way when you approach them, you're not trying to swing them too far one direction. Now, these are 6 principles of persuasion that you see. Reciprocity. People who have been given something tend to give something back. Such as if perhaps you work in a restaurant and when the meal is done, you don't just hand them a check. Instead, you hand them mints, an after dinner mint. And as you turn to walk away, you suddenly say, oh, you know, you are such a good table. I truly appreciated having you here. Here, let me give you an extra mint. You've just given them something. Do you know what that means? They feel obligated now to give you something. So instead of giving that $5 tip, you're suddenly getting that $10 tip. And this is actually a true study that was conducted, and they found that if you can give someone something, they tend to be more willing to give you something back. That's why whenever you get your junk email, oftentimes they'll give you address stamps or they give you some little thing in hopes that you'll give them something back. Consistency. If you're consistent, if you've offered a good deal to a person before, when they come back to you, they expect that same thing. And if you're consistent, if you consistently give good service, they will continue to come back to you. Social proof. Now we see these a lot in mass advertising, where it's, hey, the Whoopi Goldberg recommends that you buy this, and 5 out of 10 people enjoy the taste of Coke over Pepsi. Something of that variety, where you're offering some type of social proof that what you're proposing is better, and so they like that. Another thing is, this is true. People like people who like them. And that's the reason why you never have a salesman come up and say to you, I really don't like you, and boy, your clothes are horrible. Who dressed you this morning? Instead, what salespeople will come up to you and say is, wow, I really like you. You have great attitude, you're a great personality, and you dress so well. You liked them, so they have a tendency to like you back, which increases sale. Authority. Authority again goes back to a lot of what we've seen, where, okay, if you're going to buy a weight loss product, for instance, you buy it from an authority. This guy owns Gold's Gym in Denver, Colorado, and he's saying this is the product you need. Well, he owns the gym. He must be an authority. So you have a tendency to do that. Scarcity. We just recently seen this with toilet paper. Toilet paper sales go through the roof when you don't think you can get any. And the same happens with other products as well. If someone walks in and you're trying to sell them and say, hey, you know, I really want you to buy this and you need to do it now. I like you, but you know, if you don't buy it now, we're going to be sold out and I don't know when I get any more in. People tend to use that in sales, and you see it quite often. For a limited time only. Now, persuasion speeches on questions of fact. Now, I know we live in a world where people are throwing out alternative facts and different realities and so forth, but in all honesty, in persuasion, we need to agree on several aspects of something. And for that reason, if we're going to question facts, we really need to stick to the scientific method. We need to make sure that we're saying, okay, global warming, for instance. Well, let's agree that the scientists aren't all in a conspiracy, but instead that this data is telling us this. And so if we're really going to debate if it's a fact or not, we need to have simple things we'll agree on, like the scientific data. Another type you'll do of question of facts: do aliens exist? Is marijuana safe? Video games, do they lead to violence or not? All these are types of persuasive topics that you can undertake in your speech. And if you take any of these, realize you need to bring in some actual logos, not just emotions. Yes, aliens exist because they kidnapped me and beamed me up to their spaceship and did horrible things and then beamed me back down. Well, there's very little persuasion in that, other than you're going for ethos, you're going for emotion. Are you frightened yet of the aliens? Instead, what you need to do is try to balance it out, where if you're going to a question of fact, you actually present good information, as we talked about when we talked about doing your library research. Persuasive questions of values. There are many questions of values that we encounter. Is it right or is it wrong? You know, is it good that we do this or is it bad? And so you actually have to analyze the question and try to find the root of the question. Organizing speeches on question of values could be, is it right or wrong to eat animals? Should we not eat meat? Should we all be vegetarians? And you have to realize when we go back to if people are going to be opposed to it versus if they're going to be accepted, and understand your audience so you know where to start versus just throwing out, well, here's the poor cow in the field and make everyone feel bad. That isn't necessarily persuasive. That's just going for emotion. Discrimination on the basis of orientation. Is it wrong? I mean, to me, I absolutely believe it is. But that is a question of value that you have to actually address. Chemical weapons, are they moral or immoral? I mean, you win the war, but you've caused horrible tragedy and suffering to people. Human cloning. Should we clone humans? Is it too much? And what happens if we clone humans? What happens to the original copies? So you have to start looking at these. These are all different questions of values. Persuasive speeches on questions of policy. Now, when you look at this in front of you, this is your typical policy. They set an agenda. They have a policy formation. Now, you can easily look at this with the current situation that we're in. Should we be closing down cities? That's a policy, you know? And so what does that cause? And you just follow the circle around. And so you can then persuade on that. You can say, yes, we should, because it increases the healthiness of individuals and it prevents the disease from spreading. But others might have another point of view. So realize that is a question of policy. Should they raise tuition rates? Should they not? Should they forgive student loans? Should they not? These are all questions of policy that you can address in your persuasive speech. Hate speech. Should it be banned in college? Or should the First Amendment cover everything and you just say whatever you think whenever you think it? Music CDs. Oh, well, that's showing my age. Should music downloads be rated for violence and profanity? The college what type of college policy should they adapt towards sexual harassment? And smoking in public. Is it right to ban it? Is it wrong? These are all questions of policy that you can write a persuasive speech about. And speeches to gain immediate action. Now, in this case, your speech is going to leave with information about what a person should do, okay? That's going to be your clincher. Your clincher is going to be in there with, I need you to go do this. All right, we're going to save the rainforest, and in order to do that, I need you, after this, to pledge you're going to go to this web page and donate. So you've given them a clear-cut action to do. That leads us into Monroe's motivational sequence. Monroe's motivational sequence, once after you go through this, you'll understand it. Attention. You have to get your audience's attention. Salespeople often do this by making a comment of liking towards you or towards someone else. Such as if you're walking through the mall with your family and they want to sell you pictures, or, a family photo session, the first thing they say is, wow, you got a good looking family. And it's special to capture those moments in time. So they got your attention by commenting you, and then they've given a need. You have to capture this moment in time. Your kids will grow up. And before you know it, they'll be off at college and they'll be leaving the house. And you need to capture this. To do that, why don't I sign you up to come to our photo studio and we'll take pictures of your family now so that you can save this moment. Boom, satisfaction or solution. Visualization, this is an important one. So the next thing they say is visualize yourself. Your kids are gone off to college and you're sitting at home and you look up on the wall and there's this family photo of when they were kids. Imagine all the joy that will bring you. Yep, that's right. It's right in there. And then the final thing they say is, I have an appointment open at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Why don't I sign you up for that? Boom. As I said, you encounter this when you're in the mall. You encounter this online. You encounter this even in commercials on television. Car sales, telephone sales, all these things. You encounter Monroe's motivated sequence everywhere. So that is how you can actually write your persuasive speech. This will be included in there. So what we talked about was the importance of persuasion, the ethics in persuasion, some of the psychology of it, the types, and we went over Monroe's. Make sure you look at the rubric that is posted on D2L. It's right there under assignments. You'll go down there to persuasive, click on that folder, and you'll find the rubric in there. That tells you everything you need to know on how you're going to do this speech. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Let me know. My email is working, and if you call me on the phone, you need to leave a callback number because the way the college has it set up, it actually goes into a voice system. If you have questions, reach out to me.